for June 2022. What I'll do is, since I'll do the usual thing, which is as the meeting is recorded, so that the recording can make a note of people who are here. I'll just run through when I call out your name. If you could just briefly introduce yourself and the body that you're representing. So I'll start with. You won't know which order you're in on my screen, but so I'll keep you on your toes. But I'll start with Councillor Wagland.
Yes, very much. I'm Leslie Wagland and I'm the Cabinet Member at Essex County Council for Economic Renewal, Infrastructure and Planning. Welcome, Leslie. Adam Bryan.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Adam Bryan. I'm the Chief Executive of the LEP.
Thank you. Brian Horton.
Yeah, Brian Horton. I'm the Strategic Housing Advisor to the LEP.
Thank you. Sharon Spicer, your camera's off, Sharon, but and you're on mute. But if you could just briefly introduce yourself.
Morning, I'm Sharon Spicer and I'm from the Strategy and Intelligence team at CELEP.
Thank you, Sharon. Councillor Simmons.
Good morning, colleagues. I am County Councillor Rupert Simmons, Cabinet Member for Economy at East Sussex County Council.
Thank you, Rupert. Graham Peters.
Graham Peters, Chairman of Team East Sussex.
Thank you, Graham. Liz Gibney.
Morning, everyone. I'm Liz Gibney. I'm the Chair of KMET.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Kurzweil. Jeremy.
Hello. It was the councillor bit that confused me, Chris.
You're not a councillor.
I thought, oh, one of my long lost relatives is on the call as well.
Sorry, excuse me.
Morning, everyone. That's okay. Morning, everyone. Jeremy Kurzweil. I'm the principal of Plumpton College, but also the new chair of the CELEP Skills Working Group.
Of course you are. Thank you. Sorry, my mistake. Vince Lucas.
Hi, member of the business rep on the Kent and Midway Economic Partnership, and also the LEP's representative on Transport for South East Partnership Board.
Thank you, Vince. Penny Shimmin.
Good morning, all. I'm Penny Shimmin. I'm Chief Executive of Sussex Community Development Association and here as the Social Enterprise Representative.
Thank you, Penny. Joe Simmons.
Morning, everyone. I'm Jo Simmons and I'm the Business Development Manager for South East LEP.
Thank you. The next Joe James.
Jo James, Chief Exec at Kent Invicta Chamber and KMET Board Member.
Thank you, Joe. Claire Lewis. Claire, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Claire Lewis, Business Representative for Success Essex.
Thank you, Claire. Clive Soper.
Good morning, Clive Soper, representative from East Sussex and chairman of Hailsham Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much, Clive. David Rayner.
Morning, all. David Rayner, interim chair of Success Essex.
Thank you, David. Sarah Dance.
Good morning, all. I'm Sarah Dance. I'm Deputy Chair of the LEP.
Thank you, Sarah. Helen Dyer.
Hello, I'm Helen Dyer. I'm Capital Programme Manager at the LEP.
Thank you, Helen. Perry Gladding.
Morning, everybody. I'm Chair of Opportunity South Essex.
Thank you, Perry. Councillor Goff.
Morning, Roger Goff, Leader, Kent County Council.
Thank you, Roger. Michael Newman.
Good morning, I'm Michael Newman, Head of Finance, Essex County Council.
Thank you, Michael. Carol Ford.
Carol Ford, Kent KMET member for, oh God, I'm going to cock this right up now. Kent Director of KMET, or no, Board Director, whatever I am at KMET. Fresh food and horticulture, but there we go.
Still lucky you didn't swear, Carol.
Stephanie Ennis.
I am a Supervising Associate Solicitor at Essex County Council in the Corporate Commercial team.
Thank you, Stephanie. Councillor Coxall.
Councillor Coxall, Mark Coxall, Deputy Leader of Thurrock Council.
Thank you, Mark. Carol Barron.
Good morning, everyone. Carol Barron, Director of Knowledge Exchange and Innovation, representing Professor Karen Cox and the U9 Group.
Thank you very much, Carol. Helen Russell.
Hi, I'm Helen Russell, Strategy and Intelligence Lead at the South East Lab.
Thank you, Helen. Is there anybody I've not asked to identify themselves, or I got everybody? I'm working on 2 screens here. No, everyone being called. That's great. Okay, so as I mentioned before, this meeting will be recorded, and the recording will appear on our website in accordance with our obligations towards transparency, etc. As everyone I hope now knows, if people could keep themselves muted except when speaking, and if you want to make a point, if you could use the raise hand function when you want to speak, and hopefully my spotters will alert me and I will call on you then to speak, and I will hopefully call you in the order in which you raise your hands. If I could discourage people from using the chat function for any items that are material to the discussion, because they're not publicly accessible and we must be transparent. Should we move to votes, we will ask people to lower their raised hands between any consecutive votes so that we're crystal clear on the numbers of votes for each item. So I'll now move on to the more formal part of the board meeting and make sure that, sorry, could I ask you for any comments on the minutes of the 18th of March, which have been circulated? Anyone got any points on those, or are people happy for me to sign them in due course as a true and accurate record of the meeting? Everyone happy?
Very happy.
Good, thank you. In that case, the other thing I need to do is to remind everybody to keep your registers of interest up to date. They are looked at regularly by government and are part of our national assurance framework. So please could you make sure that your registers of interest that we keep for you are up to date. Before I hand over to Adam for matters arising, I would like to formally welcome Councillor George from Southend, who I think is being substituted by Councillor Terry, although I don't think Councillor Terry is here yet. I would also like to welcome Councillor Bayliss from East Rother Council, Vince Lucas, who's our new KMAP business rep, and Jeremy Kurzweil, who is the further education co-opt. So thank you, and you're all very welcome. I would now like to hand over to Adam for a couple of matters arising. Adam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. A couple of things to make the board aware of. Firstly, we had our annual performance review result back a number of weeks ago now. We had the rating is binary, so it's met or not met. And we were met on governance and on strategy, which is very good. There were some concerns raised by the department around delivery, and that related directly to the amount of Getting Building Fund that had been spent up until the end of the third quarter of the last financial year. This judgment was made before the Q4 return had been analysed by government. It's since been analysed, so we do expect a change in that rating. I am led to believe, following conversations this week, that we have absolutely allayed the concerns that were expressed in that initial formal notification. So I fully expect that will be straightened out over the course of the next few weeks, and we'll report back to the board on that accordingly. But aside from that issue around spend of Getting Building Fund, otherwise it was a clean bill of health, and we were really pleased. But when we get any further notification around that, I will of course let you know.
Adam, could I just interrupt 1 minute? I believe that Councillor Alan Jarrett is on, but is on has got in as an observer rather than as a delegate. Alan, we'll try and rectify that if you can hear me.
I think we've since promoted Alan to a panelist.
Okay.
Chris.
Alan, could you just introduce yourself if you're listening? Make sure you're.
Yes, thank you, Christian, and morning, everyone. Always nice to be promoted, isn't it? Alan Jarrett, I'm the leader of Medway Council. Good morning.
You're very welcome, Alan. Good morning to you. Sorry, Adam, I just thought it was important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Thanks, Chris, and welcome, Councillor Jarrett. so that was the comment around the annual performance review, and when we get any further notification around that, we'll of course let you know. Should obviously also be noted on that we had an awful lot more getting building fund to spend than any other LEP. So to get to where we've got to in itself, I think is a great result given the timescales involved in administering that fund and getting projects away. The next that I mentioned at the last strategic board. So board members should be aware that the deep dive, which is being undertaken by the City's Local Growth Unit's Central Assurance Team, is ongoing. And Essex County Council, as accountable body for CELEP, and East Sussex County Council are fully engaged in providing historic information relating to projects delivered by Sea Change Sussex. And the board will be appraised of the outcome of the deep dive when the process has completed.
Sarah, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. You'll not be surprised that as chair of the Accountability Board, I'm absolutely committed to ensuring that we operate to the highest standards in governance and transparency. And I'd just also like to note the outstanding support that we've had from Essex County Council in this respect. And as Adam said, when ongoing investigations have concluded, we will report back to Strategic Board, inclusive of any next steps that might be appropriate or not. Thank you. And also, sorry, just on, I don't know whether we want to just also mention, Adam, the next board meeting, which is the board meeting in December, which is a completely separate item. But I just wanted to put out an offer on that one, which is we wanted to have that in person. And I suggested to Adam that we might want to go and see the Yasmin Vardaman new centre, which has just been opened. Yasmin is this amazing international dancer choreographer, and through some CELEP funding and others, through the Arts Council and many others, they have just opened this amazing new space in Ashford, and I'd like to offer that as a venue for the December meeting.
Good, thank you, Sarah, very much. Everyone happy with that we go to the Yasmin Vardaman Centre in Ashford for our December meeting? Okay, good. I mean, for me, it's just a few miles down the road, but for other people, it might be a bit more of a challenge. But that's great. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, let's move on then, Adam, to item 3, which is the plans for CELEP for 2022 and stroke 23 and beyond.
Thank you very much, Chris. So this is where my practice on sharing the presentation earlier is properly put to the test. So bear with me. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Excellent. So I just wanted to give an account of where we were following the white paper and really talk about what we were doing now and a few thoughts on the future of the LEP as well, and what we should be looking to do into next year to you know, on the basis that we can afford to do it, of course. And in the middle of my presentation, Chris, I'm going to invite Helen and Sharon to come in to talk in a bit more detail on the delivery plan. So effectively, my words will top and tail Helen and Sharon's contribution to the conversation. So I needn't necessarily remind you of the recent history. So 21-22 saw the emergence of some significant uncertainty over the future role of LEPs. We heard fairly early on over the course of the last calendar year that there'd be a real change of direction when it came to capital funding, which was obviously a concern. That has borne out for the fact that UK SBF and other funding streams obviously aren't coming directly through LEPs, or you know, we have been invited to get involved to an advisory extent across anybody who wants to take that advice. But of course, there are different ways of doing that now, which is clearly important to the extent that it changes the focus of our work as an organisation and the sort of the dynamics that underpin that as well. That uncertainty last year really brought about a few staff departures. You know, a small handful. And you know, some will be obvious to the board as well. That wasn't obviously unique to us. Issues of people leaving LEPs owing to that uncertainty were reported across the country. We have fared probably slightly better than some of our colleague organisations in terms of retaining staff. I'd love to think that was because of the fact that everybody loved working in the LEP team, and maybe that contributes. But really, you know, it's still difficult. You know, it still feels like we are under-resourced for what we're trying to do. And obviously, a part of that was that whole picture was the redundancy consultation that we had to run towards the end of the last calendar year, owing to the lack of confirmed financial support. That is, though, the last I really want to talk about that. Really, we have to sort of take the white paper as a positive. So the Levelling Up white paper positively acknowledged the role and the impact of LEPs, and we received subsequent to it, and obviously since the last board meeting, a letter on the 31st of March that really gave a bit more detail. So it reaffirmed the positivity around LEPs that was in the white paper, and did something to indicate the role of LEPs moving forward, which, you know, to an extent is familiar territory. So it's about convening, empowering the business voice, undertaking strategic economic planning, delivering a range of different products. You know, the Growth Hub being a really good example, and that was writ large in that letter as well. But also the other side of it is really doing what we can as an organisation to support local moves to implement the white paper. You know, local moves around devolution, and I think a good deal of what we will do as an organisation next year really is about supporting that transition and making sure that whatever measures are put in place across our part of the country are the right ones, and that the expertise, the skills, and everything that we pull together, certainly from a LEP perspective, aren't lost, and they absolutely port across into whatever those future arrangements are, and whenever they come about, because I think we can all recognise that you know, these processes will take an awfully long time in some cases, and maybe not so in others. But it's one of those where we just have to you know, see how it unfolds, but absolutely be involved. And I suppose that the strange situation that we're in some respects is that for the first time ever in the 10 years of just over 10 years of the LEP's life, we've been given a place in policy. You know, the white paper it talks about LEPs. The letter that followed subsequently talks about the role of LEPs, and actually it's the first time that it's been referenced in sort of government policy to that strong extent. Yes, we've been given a best before date, if you like, but it's incumbent upon me and the rest of us to really make sure that, you know, whilst we're still here and whilst we can still contribute, that we do it absolutely to best effect. I'm really grateful to board members for the time that you've spent with me since the last board meeting. I said at that time that I would be looking to get together with board members, have conversations either virtually or in person, to really get a grip on your views on both what the LEPs, where the LEPs have the best impact to date, how we should organise things moving forward. Every single conversation has been really valuable. I'm really grateful for everybody who's spoken to me, and I think there's probably only a couple of, literally 2 board members that I'm yet to really have a proper conversation with on this. But what struck me was 2 things. Firstly, the real sense of support that I felt, and the buy-in to me and the team. The support that you showed, that you continue to show, is, you know, just so well received by me and everybody else. We're so grateful for it. There was, as I've reported in the paper, some things that some challenges, some things that people wanted to reflect on that could improve, and absolutely take that on board. But I think, you know, one of the things that came very strongly out of those conversations, and I think it's referenced here on just a couple of the direct quotes that I pulled out, was the impact that we've had on sector-based activities. So, you know, when we've operated to pull sectors together, whether that's through activities of the working groups or getting people to galvanise behind sector support fund bids, it's those areas where people were most complimentary, and really, you know, we recognize what we can do and what we can continue to do there, because I think, you know, we've got a degree of regional data and intelligence available to us that is probably unique to this organization, that I think can absolutely help in terms of making the case for further investment in specific sectors moving forward. We absolutely want to do that, and we absolutely want to build on those alliances, those relationships that we've built over the years, and the trust that we have. And I think, you know, it would be fantastic to sort of have this kind of conversation again in a few years' time and be able to reflect on a continued positive basis on the interventions that we've been able to make. So that was really fantastic to hear. And then I suppose the important part of those conversations were really those that caroled around what you want us to do next. And, you know, getting that ambition right is both essential and something that I need to couch in terms of the reality of the financial situation. So, you know, I need to be making sure that I look under every possible sofa, you know, sort of put my hand down at every possible sort of set of pockets that I've got to check that every bit of finance available to us is fully utilised. A lot of that is going to depend on continued support from government and the associated match that hopefully comes from local partners on that, but also looking at where we can bring in private sector support and be creative with what we've got available to us already, to really make sure that we can deliver against an agenda moving forward. So, you know, some of the comments here, I mean, I haven't doctored these in any way, so forgive me, these are just directly pulled from the notes that I made from the words that people said to me. You know, some ambition there around becoming the intelligence hub for the Southeast. I mean, fantastic. We know that we could do that, you know, if we had the resource to do it. A really interesting contribution that somebody made around making sure that our offer is as simple as possible. You know, have a dialogue with government where we communicate a really simple mission for this LEP. This is what we do, so they can more readily buy into what we're here to try to achieve. There was a big sort of the bottom one on the left hand side. I think that this was reflected by a few people. You know, there's a real acknowledgement of the expertise that we've had in terms of administering big amounts of money, because obviously we've had a really large capital program to date. We've got all the structures in place to be able to administer that and work with partners to make funding streams work. And I think, you know, taking an opportunity where people want us to support those types of programs and support grants and funds moving forward is something that people would want us to do. I think also the first two comments on the left hand side of this slide are really interesting and something that we need to bear in mind. I think a few different business reps on the board wanted us to do more to make sure that the business voice on the LEP was heard more clearly, and that the expertise that businesses bring and can bring to our conversations was pulled upon more readily than perhaps it is, which is absolutely something for us to take on board and change moving forward. I mean, a lot of the frustration there has been caused by the fact that of the last few years we've had lots of different conversations on vehicles of governance and, you know, LEP reviews and things like that. But I think in the absence of that, and with a bit of freedom to be able to deliver what we should do as a business-led organisation, then of course doing everything to make sure that the business voice here is given its due prominence is clearly going to be massively important for us to do and to get right. So some really good bits of feedback. I've got an awful lot of notes kicking around on those conversations, and if board members were interested, you know, I could certainly anonymize those and sort of put a whole compendium of those thoughts together. But for the purposes of this, I just wanted to pull a few comments out, and hopefully that gives you a bit of a picture as to some of those conversations. At this point, I'll just hand over to Helen and Sharon to give you a few slides on the delivery plan, and I'll come back towards the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Adam. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So as Adam said, we just wanted to spend give a little bit of an overview in terms of the delivery plan itself, as that's what the board is being asked to adopt today. And hopefully you'll see within that many of the themes and issues that Adam's just been talking about as well. So the content of the plan itself is broadly similar to that was shared with board members back in March. But what we've done really is been doing some further work to kind of align it even more with some of those different drivers that are now influencing CELEP's work for the current year. So kind of brought that on board as and when as more details have become available and as some of those conversations have taken place too. So the first kind of opening chapters within the delivery plan really outlined that narrative around 3 core functions that have emerged and which were outlined in Adam's supporting paper as well. Also how that work then aligns to government policy, with obviously levelling up and the levelling up missions being a key part of that. And then how those core functions are being implemented in order to deliver against the 4 existing strategic priorities that we set out in our economic recovery and renewal strategy. And just a reminder of those priorities are on the slide there. But really, I thought it'd be most helpful to just spend a few minutes talking about the headline activities that sit underneath each of those 3 functions. So the first of those, thanks Adam, being around strategic planning and intelligence. So some of the headline activities there, and this is just an overview, this is sort of, there's more detail, much more that sits beneath each of these. But firstly, it's around continuing to monitor and review the existing strategy that's in place. And hopefully board members will be aware that the latest quarterly dashboard was included in the pack for today's meeting. And we circulate that to provide an overview of both activities and economic performance aligned to those 4 priorities. Obviously, continuing to influence both regional and national policy is a huge issue. It's a hugely important role for the LEP, so we continue to do that. That includes on occasion, not just on behalf of CELEP, but in terms of the wider South East region as well. So, for example, it includes working with Catalyst South to continue to make that case for levelling up in our area through policy responses to APPGs and various other debates and consultation responses as well. It also includes other specific policy areas such as skills and also around strategic housing, where we've got some really strong links to government and which you'll hear more about later on the agenda today. As has been mentioned a little bit by Adam already, providing data and intelligence has really become kind of a core part of what we do. We regularly provide kind of strategic analysis and reports, but are also starting to do more in terms of producing deep dives and some sector specific research to complement that. So for example, to support and inform the activities of some of those working groups and that sector specific activity that's been mentioned. Quarterly data packs are now available that board members and all our other partners can download from the CELEP website, and that sits along the strategy dashboard. The other kind of more in-depth research reports that I've mentioned will also be made available on that online as and when they become available. So I think there's 2 of those on there already. And of course, that work also continues to include supporting partners as and when we're requested and where we're able to, for example, in terms of provision of data and evidence to support partners that are producing local plans and strategies, but also on kind of those issues that are important at a regional level. So for example, the development of business cases and skills plans for Freeports has been obviously really important and continues to be going forward. So our second core function reflects the key role that CELEP has in terms of communicating, collaborating and convening. And the first bit that we wanted to mention is that to operate more effectively and efficiently going forward, we're working to evolve our engagement so that we can reach that wider range of stakeholders and really have that business voice that Adam was talking about. The strategy network approach that we're adopting offers us a lighter touch approach to the administration of the established working groups, which then allows us to engage more with the wider business community and some of those other groups and organisations, such as the ones that are represented on the slide here. As part of that, we're also then working to evolve our website to serve as an even more useful tool in terms of sharing information, data and resources across that network, and to encourage greater collaboration between us and partners and within the network as well. Secondly, we've spoken a bit in the past about the major projects group, which is another key area where some of the largest projects in our region are working really positively as a collective on key issues around skills and workforce, supply chain, and more recently around the decarbonisation challenges. So of those, I think the skills work is currently the most progressed, and there's a full action plan that's now in place. We also held a recent webinar that hopefully some board members may have been able to attend. And we continue to collaborate with the skills advisory panel and the skills working group to take that activity forward. We're also then exploring some potential areas for CELEP to support priorities around inward investment and increasing innovation by looking at where we can really add value to existing activities. So, for example, that might be around promoting inward investment on a more thematic basis, such as for our coastal communities, and then also working with universities and through business support to enable more businesses to access innovation funding that's already out there, but that we might not be drawing in as much as we can to the area currently. So in terms of ongoing delivery, which is our kind of third key function, if you like, we obviously continue to deliver on existing programs such as the Growth Hub, our capital funding program, and the COVID-19 funds. We're also we will be conducting evaluation and analysis around those CELEP investments, so including the ones mentioned there, but also other programs that are further down the line, such as Sector Support Fund and GPF. We continue to support delivery of some of those external activities and the work of partnerships where that CELEP really has a strong role to play and are really important on a regional and national level. So that includes things such as the Freeports, the various town boards in our area, strategic transport bodies, and the South East Net Zero Hub. And then in terms of some of the work that we're continuing to explore going forward, that includes looking at the benefits of using residual and returned monies, such as around Growing Places Fund, for additional activity that can stimulate regional growth and build on kind of that activity that has now, and that funding that is now being accessed at a more localised level. So the delivery plan does provide a lot more detail on how these various activities will be delivered on a quarterly basis throughout the year. It also includes important information on our capital programme and our budgets and around risk management. And importantly, it does identify some key indicators that can be used to track economic progress in relation to these various priorities. We do expect that for next year's plan, there'll be more of a steer and a mandate from government around the metrics that they particularly want us to monitor and deliver against within the LEP delivery plan. So we'll obviously continue to have conversations throughout this year to understand more about what that looks like. But that's all I want to say on the delivery plan for now. So hand back to Adam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I indicated at the beginning of the presentation that really I wanted to stop talking about the miserable last year, and absolutely that's the case. You know, I want to take this conversation today as a line in the sand, and wherever we can sort of end the ambiguity that we've been operating in for the last year and a half. You know, we know that things are going to meld and change and mutate into whatever they need to around delivering the devolution elements of the Levelling Up white paper. But before that happens, you know, we've got a job to do. And you know, elements of that job, as you've just seen through Sharon's bit of the presentation, are unique to us, and to many in many respects they're more important than ever. You know, we have the knowledge, you know, that we've got the relationships, we've got a track record of delivery. I've already said that, you know, we've really got to make sure that we focus on conveying the voice of business and empowering that voice in everything that we do. We need to sort of create that space to operate, and I want to provide security to my staff, and to provide you know, that almost that kind of same level of support to stakeholders. You know, we're here, we're not going to disappear. So really that's all about making sure that we're here to do a job that you recognize as adding value. It's not just about surviving through a situation where we've got reduced funding. It's about dealing with that, you know, maximizing that funding wherever we can get hold of it, but maximizing the impacts that we have as an organization, and that's absolutely where we need to be. I've just mentioned about sort of, you know, finding that space, finding that niche. Sharon's gone through this in detail, but there are things that we do that other organizations don't necessarily do. That major projects conversation, I cannot stress to you enough, is fully bought into by the big organizations that are part of that discussion, that are talking about skills requirements, that are talking about supply chain development. You know, they're conversations that they want to have on that regional scale. We've given them that forum, you know, very much supported by local colleagues, as you'd expect, but it's valued by them much more than I ever expected it might be. and they turn up, they contribute loads, and it's a really exciting agenda moving forward. That the piece around data and intelligence is a stronger suit for us than it's been ever before. So, you know, that's something that we can absolutely bring both to, you know, what we do to identify opportunities at a CELEP kind of scale, but also what we can do to support local partners when you need that degree of sort of broader context for the arguments that you might need to make around what you want to support on a local basis. Delivering the growth hub, really important. Joe will talk about it in a few minutes' time. It's become really challenging because the funding for that has reduced by 50%, but it's really important. You know, supporting businesses, supporting SMEs is one of those areas that has given us, you know, more credibility than anything else in respect of how we're viewed by local businesses, and that's something that we want to continue to do in the way that we've been doing it. We've clearly had a big impact around the skills agenda. I hope that colleagues would reflect that too. Making sure that we can continue to do that is really important. Being able to resource that is vital too. And of course, completing the capital programme. You know, we've had more capital funding to administer than any other LEP. And, you know, we need to make sure that we get that over the line with the projects that are yet to finish. But also, you know, we've talked before about undertaking a piece of work to really look at, audit the impact of that capital programme. And we'll do that because it's really important that we, as I've got on my last point here, that we prove the impact of investment here, and that we also prove the need for it as well. Because, you know, as we would all argue, you know, levelling up, whether it lasts, whether it perpetuates as a sort of political slogan, whether it's there in a few years' time, the argument's always the same. You know, that the requirement for regeneration and investment in growth is every bit as strong here as it is anywhere else. So continuing to make that case for this area will continue to be important. So 5 areas of focus as I wrap up the presentation, hand back to you, Chris. Try to simplify this. I mean, this is a complicated picture that I've tried to simplify as much as I can. What do I see as being the things that we need to focus on? You know, aside from the specific things that Sharon talked about. Number one, deliver. You know, we've got a plan for 22, 23. Let's deliver it. Let's get on with it. You know, there's no messing about. Let's get right stuck in. We need to move quickly onto planning for next year. Government have been clear that they, as the second point, you know, government have been clear that they want delivery plans for 23, 24 agreed with them by November this year. So we need to move quickly on that. Obviously, what's going to come part of those conversations is how that's resourced, and I think we'd like to think that government could demonstrate support for us in that space as well. But that's about identifying all possible resources, agreeing a way forward with government, and removing that ambiguity. You know, we've got a strong body of work, you've just heard it, but I think moving into next year, that is appended by, you know, really doing more to support whatever's happening locally around implementing the devolution elements of the white paper. The third one is around building back. So, you know, we need to strengthen wherever we can. And I think in doing that, we would be able to provide confidence to the board, to you, and to the existing staff and to stakeholders that, you know, we're here, we're able to do a job. And, you know, we've got enough resource behind us to really continue to make a difference. Fourth, and really important, you know, we need to influence devolution conversations. So, you know, a feature of those, of all of those conversations is around how LEP powers are administered in any new arrangements. Personally, I don't think that it's possible for those discussions to happen without us contributing to them, because we are the people who know what that actually means. You know, it's one thing reflecting it on a list of things that you might want to bring to a conversation with the minister, but obviously, you know, there's a fair bit more depth to what a LEP's really there to do. And I think it would be really helpful for everybody involved for us to be as involved in those conversations as possible, whether that's through me or members of the board, we should absolutely make sure that we are there to influence those discussions and make them all the stronger, because what's important is that whatever's in place locally is as good as it can possibly be. And I think us being part of those discussions is absolutely going to help that. And then lastly, I think we absolutely need to look beyond structures. You know, we've obsessed for too long about governance and about how we respond to things like the LEP review, you know, what the team looks like and how our model works and how it needs to be supported moving forward and all of those things, you know, what might happen as a result of all the conversations following the white paper. You know, that shouldn't be our obsession. Our obsession should be about focusing on the needs of business, focusing on the development of sectors, focus on, you know, analysing what those trends are, what's happening in the economy and responding accordingly. Some of the conversations I had with board members have sat really strongly in my mind. I went down to Maidstone a couple of weeks ago. I had a fantastic conversation with Carol about food production. You know, Carol told me loads of things that I didn't know before, and it's those kinds of that knowledge, you know, and the ability to sort of convene around specific sectors and specific needs is absolutely what we need to be doing as the LEP, and worrying less about, you know, all the time about actually what might happen next in terms of the sort of organizational framework. And that really sort of melds into the message that we had from business when I've been having those conversations about making sure that we're there to represent them first and foremost. So really focusing on the economy is one to take away. Chris, that was all I had as a presentation. Sorry if I went on for slightly too long, but I've really welcome comments from the board and really thank them again for all of their conversations they've had with me over the last couple of months.
Thank you, Adam. I would just note that you and I are attending the first get-together of LEP chairs and CEOs for almost getting on for 3 years on Monday.
It's a long time.
Where we will be discussing across the piece exactly these sorts of issues, and we will be getting an understanding of how other LEPs are responding to the sort of challenges, and they're divided really into two principal groups: those that are already part of or going to shortly become part of devolution plans, and then the rest for where devolution in their areas is slightly further off. And I guess we probably fall into the second category. So I'll be attending workshops on that. Incidentally, also there's a meeting again, first physical meeting for 3 years or 2 years anyway, on Catalyst South on Monday as well. So quite a busy day. Anyway, I'll be very interested in if anyone's got any comments or observations on what Adam has just said. So I've got Joe James and then Councillor Wagland. So Joe, over to you first, and then Councillor Goff and David Rayner and Jeremy.
Thank you, Adam. And I think your five steps at the end there are very well thought through and definitely the right one. I'm pleased you touched on actually the one point I was going to raise, but I thought I would highlight it anyway. I was just going to reinforce the point you made about not losing the knowledge and experienced staff if and when we transition to new structures. And as well as the staff, I think it might be worth us looking at some sort of transition plan, but also that we start working more closely with the officers at county level to ensure that actually, there's plenty of knowledge sharing, none of that's lost, and to see how we then support each other going forward. And the other point is one of the areas of focus for LEPs over the next few years is international trade. And as the UK's global gateway is one of our priorities in our economic recovery and renewal strategy, I just wanted to raise Operation Drop and the delays to international trade as a result of this. From a KMET perspective, we would very much like to look at doing a very wide-reaching business consultation on the impact. And, as ROC isn't just a Kent issue, it affects businesses across the LEP area, the region, actually nationally come to that. I just wanted to raise it to see if this is something that CELEP could actually get involved in.
Thank you, Joe. That's very good points. As a resident who lives within 5 miles of Junction 8 of the M20, Operation Brock is something that's particularly close to my heart, and all businesses actually around that corridor who really do suffer. So that's a really important priority. Okay, so I've got Councillor Wagland, Councillor Goff, David Rayner, Jeremy Kurzweil, Sarah Dance, and then Claire Barron. So Councillor Wagland, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. My congratulations actually to the staff for handling both a very difficult year and for pulling together a plan of this kind. So, you know, I'm in awe of your work, Adam, and sadly, I don't think we've had a one-to-one, and therefore I haven't had the opportunity to make these points to you directly. But I just wanted to throw down a few challenges as if you haven't got enough to cope with, so for that. But the first one would be to endorse the challenge you've set yourselves, which is to find the voice for business. We've just done our sector development piece of work at a fairly high level of detail at Essex, and I think many of you will have seen it. We launched it comparatively recently, and it's been interesting actually. We liaised with 600 businesses, and I'm just wondering how we ensure that the voice that is provided by CELEP accesses the same sort of range, for example, because it seems to me that my concern always with CELEPs is that I had lots of contacts with Birmingham at the time that the LEP there was originally set up, and I'm conscious of the fact that if you'll forgive me, as someone who's come back to the LEP after having been with it when Councillor John Spence was leading it, it's been very interesting to me to see the impact, I think, that the uncertainty about its role has had. So for me, I think my concern is, how do you propose to do that voice of business, and how do we make sure that it is as broad as it can be, or perhaps better, to pick up your point about the coordinating role and use the material that's already being done elsewhere. That takes me into your point about another part of the role that I see as being the real key part, which is coordinating and dealing with regional scale. And I'd like to pick up Joe's point about the international side of it. So, so for me, that's a really big ticket role. And it leads me into my third point, which would be about the challenge of no duplication. And I do think that one of the things that would be very useful is to decide what CELEP is not going to do as much as what it is going to do. You talked about what sounded to me like, and I appreciate the plan is much more detailed and focused than this, but it was a very broad range of enormous work to be done. I think for me, the key is to build on what's already there and overlay it with the expertise that this body has, by reference to the voice of business, by reference to the regional scale, by reference to international, and particularly the free ports and exports. Other things are available, of course. And then if I might just very quickly, I did want to talk about the comms narrative, because I don't believe very many people know about CELEP, and that's you know, a feature of enormous parts of the way in which this country works, but it seems to me particularly so here. And I believe in the telling of stories. I think we don't tell the stories enough, and I think we need narratives, and I think any business which is engaging with us should have a responsibility to help with that narrative, because told by politicians it'll get the usual reaction, told by real business people it won't. So those would be my compliments and challenges to you for the future going forward.
Leslie, thank you very much. Adam, do you want to respond to, I mean, there's a very interesting point, good points and very interesting perspectives. Do you want to respond to any of that? Shall I allow you to sum up at the end?
Let me sum up at the end. There's quite a lot to, and I'm thinking about time. There's so many good points, and I'm conscious that a few of the people want to make them. It's almost going to be working, taking it offline and responding. But I absolutely take on board and agree with everything that Councillor Wagland and Joe have already said.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Goff, you're next. Roger.
Thank you. Agree very much with what's already been said. I think the presentation was very good, and I think, Adam, as I recall, we had a very, certainly from my point of view, was a very helpful conversation in your rounds on this. I think the challenge, the last two, that I agree with, I think Joe said that final slide with the 5 points was very good. And I'd particularly pick up the last two, because I think it's getting the right balance of sort of continuity and change. This is going to change. It's going to change probably over the next couple of years. And I think Adam used the term "best before," which was rather a good phrase. So I think using the resources and the skills and the all the assets that CELEP has to work into that process, which I think was your fourth point, I think is absolutely right. And that means all of us actually got to keep our lines very, very open on this. So a kind of no surprises on all sides, I think will help ensure that's not then a disruptive process. And I think the second element was, I think, entirely right in, as I think was said in the final slide, certainly on, I think it was the final point, keeping a number of those very specific tasks so that there is a sense of momentum, morale, that this is an organization which can then go on probably in different form, but to be doing worthwhile things, I think again is absolutely right. So I think it's balancing those two out, but recognizing we are going to be in a world of change, roughly probably over a 2-year time frame, and working very openly around that. But I think the overall direction, there may be some areas, and we may come back to this in the Growth Hub discussion, for example, where there's a question about the trade-off between what continues to be done at the LEP level and what is done already at a devolved level, and may well continue to do, well, may well take on that form more decisively in the future. But as a general approach, I think what's set out is very good, and I'd particularly emphasize the points I've just made.
Thank you, Roger. All good points, which will be noted. I've got, just so everyone knows what the order is, it's David Rayner, then Jeremy Kurzweil, Sarah Dance, and then Claire Barron. So, David, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. I echo everything that Councillor Wagner said, and my point was more on the strength of business voice moving forwards. Once we get into the devolution discussions, because it seemed to me that the levelling up paper was watering down the strength of the business input into that from what it currently is under the LEPs, and I'm very keen, obviously, to make sure that continues. And I believe that with all of the county councils and the other authorities that are on this call, we actually have very good relationships between the local authorities and the business community. And obviously, within Essex, we have Success Essex and Opportunity South Essex, and I hope and believe that those discussions and that involvement will continue going forwards. And the second point that I had, which and I apologise, it doesn't affect Kent and East Sussex, is that there is this newly formed community called the Eastern Powerhouse, that's been led by James Palmer, who was the mayor of Cambridge, Greater Cambridge, under their devolved administration. He obviously sees that there is a gap to bring in discussions between authorities and the business voice, and I think it would be very good for us and the authorities who are on this call, certainly from Essex's perspective, to make sure that we are forming a proper voice for local authority and business to take matters forward, rather than any other organisation trying to gate crash that.
Indeed. Thank you very much, David. That's a very interesting point. I've got Jeremy Kurzweil, and I should add that after Claire Barron, we've got Rupert Simmons, Graham Peters, and Mark Cogswell. So, Jeremy, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Adam, yeah, really good presentation, I think, with a lot of really considered kind of perspective in terms of next steps after a very challenging kind of period, but totally buy into that need to draw the line, I think, and move forwards and build on those successes. Unsurprisingly, I just wanted to kind of make a point about skills, and you know, whether we're talking economic generation, development, recovery, regeneration, skills is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, enabler in all of this. And equally, you know, one of CELEP's most unique features or redeeming features is its geography. And therefore, I'm really pleased to see the Major Skills Project and the work of the Major Skills Project Group continue, because any one of those projects, I think, on its own, represents one of the biggest construction programs that this country would have seen in the last 10, certainly the next 10 years. Collectively, the biggest risk to us being able to deliver these is skills. Yet in some respects, the biggest opportunity in terms of positive economic impact is equally local skills. So let's not underestimate the value of skills in all of this. But yeah, just wanted to lend a word of support for the major projects focus.
Thank you, Jeremy. Actually, interestingly, I've been asked for Monday to come prepared with what this is the LEP Chairs CEOs meeting I referred to earlier. What I've been most proud about that the LEP has done over the course of the last few years, and I think that certainly skills and what we've done in CELEP on skills has got to be way up there. But I've asked Adam to help me answer that question. But certainly it was one thing that I thought that we could do something quite good at for what CELEP's done in relation to skills, Adam, when we talk about CELEP on Monday. Yeah, good, Jeremy. Thank you. Sarah Dance.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo what many people have said, you know, skills, business voice, really, really important. But I wanted to also particularly thank the staff and actually all of the support of the local officers, local authority officers, in the help and support that they've given us. So huge thank you to them. And I think just one of the things that I would like to emphasize is some of the challenges going forwards in terms of opportunity grabbing. Adam, I know, you know, how up to the wire you are in terms of the agendas and how much the staff are trying to juggle. But it's just about how do we ensure that we don't lose some opportunities as and when they come, because they are coming quite thick and fast at the moment. And a really good example of that at the moment is the Create Growth programme that the DCMS have announced, which specifically mentions the opportunities for the LEPs to bid for that money. I know that we are through my chairship of co-chairship of the South East Creative Economy Network trying to pull together a bid with the support of some of the local authority officers. But I know these opportunities will continue, and they're about how we can support creative. Though that one in particular is about how we can support creative businesses to grow over the next while. So there will be 6 regional places that will get that money. It would be great if it was the South East, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that it's a more general point about how we ensure and buy in the resource for you to be able to have the opportunity to grab those things, those projects as they come.
Yeah, very important, Sarah. Thank you. Carol Barron. Carol, you're next. And then after Carol, we've got Rupert Simmons, Graham Peters and Mark Cogswell. So Carol, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. That was really, really great, and echo everybody's views, thanking you and the staff. They've been great throughout this process. But just picking up on a few things, I was really pleased to see the policy role for the LEPs. The U9, all universities have fantastic policy units. You know, we are informing government all the time on setting standards, and I think it would be a good opportunity for CELEP to actually harness some of that, but equally for some of the academic community to benefit from some of the policy coming out from the LEP. The other thing is the data intelligence that you mentioned. You said about in the context of local plan strategies and things like that. That sort of intelligence is critical to the university sector when we are submitting funding applications. We have to demonstrate why would we give you any money, and it's going to be even more important with the levelling up, I think, that we have that data, and you're brilliant at providing that. Skills, I am going to support on this. We had a great U9 meeting yesterday, and thank you to Sharon for coming along. Skills is across everything that's coming out of the government, and the work you've done is fantastic, but there was a bit of a sense of frustration from the U9 that there are needs now, you know, what's in train and what's coming in the future, and that there's a real need to start to get some quick wins out there. I chair an economic development group. It's always skills and recruitment that is the main priority for the business community. So I think what we're going to try and look at is how we can respond possibly to getting some quick wins out around skills, because we really need it. And finally, just in the fuller document that was circulated, Objective 6 around support equality. I know we had a discussion previously about EDI and how it's important, but that has to flow through every single thing that the LEP does, because I don't get a sense for that. Everything that I submit to government at the moment, I have to do an EDI assessment about all our activities, who we've engaged with, is it benefiting or is it open to everybody? So I just think that has to be pulled out and embedded more going forward. And it's something I'm passionate about, and I'm happy to get involved in any discussions.
Thank you very much indeed, Carol. We'll note those and skip the importance of U9 and skills and higher education and further education working together is, as I mentioned, one of the things that is really, really important for our economy. So, Councillor Simmons, over to you. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. I would start by adding to the compliments already made by our colleagues on the panel, made by Adam and his team. This definitive plan has our absolute approval from East Sussex. I think we need to be fully aware of the importance of growth in the nation's economy, which will be crucial to our prosperity going forward. And the role of the LEPs can only still be a vital factor in encouraging growth, but also particularly that of the level of skills in increasing our productivity. So all said, a well worked out plan which has the support of East Sussex.
Rupert, thank you very much indeed. It's good to hear a full endorsement from East Sussex. Continuing with the East Sussex theme, Graham.
Yes, thank you, Adam and the team. And it's great to hear us really in, excuse me, pushing forward and really positive mode. Throughout, there's always quite properly and understandably reference to resources. And I sense that there's a constraint on some of the things we would like to do, because we're not as fully resourced as we might like to be. It also occurs to me that we've had a substantial number of millions of GPF funding returned into our pot, and I know we're going to eventually get round to redistributing that. But is there any reason why some of that should not be, a relatively small proportion of that should not be reprofiled to help you with your ambitions to do even more exciting work of the sort we've been doing in the past?
Good question. I'm sure Adam will respond in due course, Graham. So hold that thought. And then, so thank you for that. And then Councillor Coxon.
Yes, yeah, I was. It's really important, and in the document, and there was the most salient fact for me was in page 9 of the pack that come with a letter, and it's about the future of it, because it's in the hands of the LEP as well to facilitate that, and I think it's in the hands of actually the local government leaders on here to actually make sure that, and reflecting on what David from the business said, that the LEP is the item that in the devolution deal that's coming forwards, any devolution deals, there's got to be a business element in that, and the LEP is the voice to bring that into any devolution deal. And it's disappointing, and I think that's why I say to business leaders, especially in Essex, the LEP is an important part to play to making sure that the 3 top tier councils here are working together and working to actually get a good devolution deal that has business voice in it. And I think really it should be, the LEP should be sitting in them conversations. And it's not for us to put it in our cap with the plan, maybe, but it is for the leaders and the local authorities having a conversation with government to invite the LEP and this LEP to be sitting in them conversations to make sure that the businesses fully aware of what's happening with devolution. It delivers the aims of the minister's letter to us. It says the full role of the LEP depends on their local circumstances. Well, we need to shape the local circumstances with the LEP involved. And if the LEP is not in them conversations of the devolution deal, it's left out. And I've mentioned this to Adam, I think we met a couple of times. I think that Essex is critical that the LEP can play a facilitator amongst the three of us to make sure, and the local authorities, to get a good devolution deal that does have business involved in it. But if you're not invited to that, and I think my plea is really to the leaders on this, sitting as directors, to invite Adam or yourself, Chris, and that to make sure you're in the room in conversations.
Sure, thank you, Mark. Those good points. Okay, so quite a bit there to get your teeth into, Adam. Do you want to respond?
I probably shouldn't now because we're desperately over time, albeit this is a really valuable discussion. I will suggest what I'll do, because every single point that everybody's made is really valid and deserves a full response. What I will do is when we send the minutes out following the meeting, I'll put a written response to all of the points that have just been made, because I think I want to address them all. And you know, we clearly haven't got the time now, but thank you, everybody.
Okay, so what we ask you to do then is to agree to adopt the 2022/23 delivery plan as detailed in Appendix A. Can I have a show of hands to show that you
agreed
to that? Thank you very much. I think that's good. Thank you. And then just to note a couple of things, to note the emerging plans of CELEP's work beyond 2022/23 and the discussions required to secure the medium-term future of the partnership. And finally, to note the headline messages accompanying the CELEP's refreshed body of work, and that they will be used in electronic messaging from the date of the board meeting. Okay, and then Adam will respond in the way that he's just suggested. Okay, good. Adam, I think I now need to hand the chairing of the meeting to you, and Sarah and I will be, I think we will be withdrawn for the time being for the next item.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'll just give it a few seconds to make sure that Chris and Sarah both disappear. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for your support on the last item. So next item on the agenda is recruitment of new chair. And I mean, I think what we have in the paper is fairly self-explanatory, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things in there. The two key things to agree today are that we agree to begin the recruitment process for the chair, and that involves convening a panel of a selection panel. So we've detailed in section 4.4 of the paper a proposal for how that might look. So a representative from each of the federated boards, a business representative from each of the federated boards, supported by up to 3 public sector reps and 1 rep for HE or FE. And subsequent to that, we've got a process laid out that will be culminating in the appointment of a new chair in February 2023. We're suggesting that a process for the appointment or reappointment of deputy chair follows, because I think there are lots of reasons why one should be subsequent to the other. And obviously, in doing this, the proposal is that we, albeit to hopefully a value for money extent, that we engage an agency to support in the process as well, because we should, we need to make the search as good as possible and be open, transparent in doing it. The other thing to note is that we won't be in a position to pay allowances for chair and deputy chair positions from next year onwards. Probably self-explanatory that the finances don't allow us to do that. So actually, that would bring us in line with most of the LEPs. I think the majority of LEPs don't offer an allowance to their chair or deputy chair. That was a decision that was taken for CELEP some years ago because of the unique challenge and the unique size of this LEP. But we're seeking agreement that we don't do that from April 23 onwards. So the immediate really is about getting together that selection panel. So we're asking board directors to express their interest in being involved in the panel by the end of the calendar month, and after that we'll be in touch with the board to confirm who's sitting on that panel, and really push ahead from there. So I think that's really it. I don't want to repeat anything that's in the paper. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, and I hope you buy into it, but invite any questions from board members. Okay, excellent. In which case we can move to the decisions then. So the first one is to agree to begin the recruitment process for the chair and form a selection panel with delegated responsibilities as detailed in section 4 of the paper. Are we agreed on that?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. And secondly, agree that no allowances will be paid for the role of chair and deputy chair once the current terms of office have expired, and this would apply to any extension of term that might be offered to the deputy chair. Are we agreed on that?
Agreed.
Agreed.
That's great, thank you. I should just point out a couple of things as well, in case you wondered. Chris had been keen for me to say that his extending for this past year was agreed as an exception, obviously by the board, but also by government, given the circumstances that we're in. And he can, after doing the role for 7 years, he can't be a candidate in any circumstances, and indeed doesn't intend to be. And the other thing just to raise is the gender requirements that come into effect from March of next year, where the constitution of the LEP needs to be 50% male female in terms of the directors of the LEP board, which is material to this discussion as well. And that was something that Chris was keen that I raised, but that's just a bit of background information. But thank you to board members for agreeing that. Graham, you got a raised hand. Is that a so-called legacy hand, or did you have an additional point?
Sorry, legacy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I will, Amy, if you could bring Chris and Sarah back in, that would be great. And Chris knows to crack straight on with the next item when he comes back. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, we're all set with that. Good. In that case, we're on to item 5, which is the capital program update. So I'd like to hand over to Helen Dyer for this item, please. Helen, over to you.
Thank you. So this report provides the usual update on the capital programme and touches on all 3 of the funding streams. As would probably be expected, I'm primarily going to focus on the proposed approach for the development of the new GBF project pipeline, but we'll also just pick up on a couple of other points within the report. So as set out in the report, at the May Accountability Board meeting, the Riding Sunbeam Solar Railways project was removed from the GBF programme, and this is released 2.5275 million for reallocation to alternative projects. Sorry, there is an existing GBF project pipeline, one project remaining on that pipeline, which is Braintree Active Travel, and it has been confirmed by officers that the project will not be able to spend the funding in accordance with the required time frame, and therefore a new pipeline is required to inform the reallocation of the entire value of the GBF that has been returned to us. So given that the GBF programme officially ended on the 31st of March this year, I did seek advice from government as to how they felt that the reallocation of the funding should be managed. And they did provide me with 3 possible options to consider. These were set out in order of preference and are all listed in the report, but their preferred option was for us to seek reallocation of the funding to existing GBF projects. And also the advice from the government did include a clear expectation that the projects receiving the funding should be deliverable within the 22-23 financial year. We have obviously considered a number of approaches to the development of this new pipeline, but the majority of the options available wouldn't allow for full spend of GBF funding by the 31st of March 2023 and have therefore been discounted. And this includes the addition of new projects to the GBF programme, as due to required governance processes, it is unlikely that the GBF funding would be awarded until February 2023 at the earliest, making delivery within 22-23 very difficult. So the proposed approach is to reallocate the available funding to existing GBF projects which have experienced a cost increase due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, Brexit, or due to current high inflation levels, with the funding being used to support delivery as set out in the original project business cases, which have already been approved by Accountability Board. This approach is recommended there is a risk that if further financial support is not provided to these projects, that they will not be able to deliver in accordance with their agreed business cases. and it may be necessary for some projects to reduce their outputs, which will therefore also reduce the scale of benefits that we realise. In addition, there is a risk that alternative funding sources need to be sought to bridge funding gaps, but this will have an impact on the time frame for spend of the existing GBF funding allocation. So it's set out within the report, but it is recommended that projects seeking additional GBF funding are able to demonstrate the following. Firstly, a legitimate case why additional funding is required to support delivery of the project, including a clear explanation as to how the COVID-19 pandemic, Brexit, or high inflation levels have impacted on the project. We'll also need to understand the implications for the project and its ability to deliver in accordance with the business case if additional funding is not awarded. We will need to receive confirmation of the ability of the project to spend the GBF funding by the 31st of March 2023, including assurances that there are no significant delivery risks and provision of a robust delivery programme. We would need to receive confirmation that the project will continue to offer high value for money. So given the time constraints associated with the award and spend of this funding, it is recommended that only those projects which offer the BCR comfortably above 2 to 1 within the business case, or which applied one of the exemptions set out in the insurance framework at the time of funding award, can apply for the funding. And finally, we understand the additionality that we realise as a result of the additional funding. It is acknowledged that in most cases, there won't be additionality in excess of what was set out in the business case, but it may be that additional funding would allow some elements of the project which would otherwise be removed to be re-added, or it might be that additional works are needed to now bring forward the forecast benefit. So as to ensure that as many projects as possible benefit from the available funding, it is recommended that the maximum amount of GBF funding awarded to any one project is £400,000. It is intended that if the board support this approach, an application form and guidance note will be circulated to local authority partners prior to the end of this month. Federated boards will then be asked to prioritise applications received from projects within their areas in September, with this board being asked to agree the prioritised project pipeline in October, with the Accountability Board awarding funding in November. So just to quickly move on to the other decisions out within the report, which is the request from the Swan Modular Housing Factory project to retain the GBF funding allocation beyond March 2022. Additional time is required to spend the GBF funding due to the project experiencing significantly longer lead-in times for some items than originally anticipated, the need to identify alternative suppliers in order to mitigate cost increases, and in some cases, the need to develop alternative solutions so as to mitigate the issues caused by cost increases and extended lead-in time. The delivery of the GBF funds elements of the project are nearing completion, and it is expected that construction will commence at the factory in July or August this year, with the full fit out of the factory due to complete in March 2024. Just a couple of other quick points I wanted to flag. So firstly, on the GBF programme, as the board are aware, the objective of the Getting Building Fund funding stream was to support projects which would play an important and immediate role in the positive reset of the national economy post-COVID-19, with the funding designed to support shovel-ready projects which could be delivered by the 31st of March 2022. As the GBF programme has now officially ended, a complete review of all ongoing GBF projects was conducted in advance of the last Accountability Board meeting. This review is designed to confirm that the ongoing projects remain deliverable and to feed into the establishment of a mechanism for ensuring timely completion of the GBF programme. So following that review, the Accountability Board agreed a set of requirements which must be met by all projects forecasting GBF spend beyond March 2022, and these requirements are set out within the report. The Accountability Board will continue to receive regular updates on those progress towards meeting those requirements. Finally, just to quickly pick up on 2 Growing Places Fund projects. Firstly, just to confirm that the Popple Wolf project has now been removed from the GBF project pipeline following confirmation of Levelling Up Fund funding to support delivery of the project. And this currently means that there are no projects remaining on the pipeline. And secondly, I just wanted to highlight a repayment risk with regard to the Eastbourne Fishermen's Quayside Infrastructure Development Project. Repayment of £250,000 was due by the end of March 2022. However, it was only possible for a payment of £100,000 to be made. As the project defaulted on the agreed repayment schedule, interest is now chargeable on the remaining balance of the loan. Work is ongoing to formulate a robust proposed revised repayment schedule for the project, and is expected that this will be presented to the Accountability Board in September. As a number of changes to the repayment schedule for this project have previously been approved, the revised repayment schedule will also be brought to this board for consideration in October. I think that's all I was going to say.
Okay, Helen, thank you very much. Are there any comments, questions, or observations on what Helen has just said? Yes, Councillor Goff.
Thank you, Chris. I would just like to, on the uses to which the remaining GBF, and particularly the funding released by riding sunbeams, might be put for to uses to which that could be put. I would like to put forward an alternative or partially alternative option, which relates to something that we discussed at and agreed actually at the February Accountability Board, which was the TechFort project in Dover. This we agreed then that we would put £1 million to that, and that is for bringing forward the work, which is a mixture of galleries, space for creative businesses, educational uses, a market, and so on, within that sort of old MOD site within Dover. And this would apply to two of the so-called casemates, in other words, the sort of gun emplacement areas. For an additional £1 million, you could basically double up that same activity with the same, with again, doubling up in effect in terms of jobs and other outputs. And it is something that could be done within the time frame through to March 23 as well, because it's not a new project. It's one where we agreed to support the first part of a project. It would itself, that first part would be delivered on quite a tight timeline between, I think, August and December. So I would ask at least leave from the from colleagues that there is the scope to bring forward a proposal on that, and if we could, if the board could consider that as part of the package.
Thank you.
I appreciate we can't make a decision on that today, but it's the opportunity to bring that forward as an option I would like to be able to put forward.
Yes, it's just, and it actually is also, TechFort has just received planning permission last month, didn't it, for its for what it wants to do, I believe.
Yes, that's right. It got both planning permission and the list of
scheduled monuments.
Scheduled monuments, exactly. So those were the conditions we set when we agreed it earlier in the year. And of course, that does mean also that there's a lot less friction, if you like, in taking it forward.
Sure.
And it is, of course,
an area
needing levelling up.
Yes, Roger, we'll take that under consideration. I got Councillor Wagland and then Graham Peters. Leslie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In principle, I'm supportive of Roger's suggestion. Obviously, it's an application to be made, and I'm not sure this is the place to make applications, but you're right that it would otherwise be restricted. And I think it's the restrictions point that brings me to put my hand up, because there is a concern amongst officers that a combination of the 400,000 cap per project and some of the limited grounds for application may risk some of the GBF underspend pot not being reallocated. So I'm sort of looking for a reassurance on that. And I think probably the bit in me that thinks that my crystal ball is always absolutely hopeless in terms of these things would tend to suggest that it might be good to have a get out of those restrictions clause in the event that things should come forward because they carry relevant merits. And in a sense, Roger just made my case on that for me.
Adam, I don't know if you want to respond to that point or do it at the end. I don't know if you want to respond to that point.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I didn't realise. I should probably do it at the end. I mean, the paper in itself is well considered, and I think to a great extent, when this prioritisation has gone through, it happens initially at a federated board level. So, if a message comes very strongly from a federated board, then of course, that's we take that on board as the LEP. So, but I must, from my perspective, the notion of enhancing a project, as we've just sort of touched on, doesn't seem like a bad thing at all.
Yeah, could I just make the point that that's not actually the answer to the point I was making, Adam? Sorry, but the point I'm making is that we do not know,
restrictions
are in very uncertain times. I think there is a view that this sort of restriction is a bit arbitrary, and that we have been very successful as a board at dealing with what you might call the exceptions. If there isn't an exception opportunity, you end up with a problem beloved of these sorts of situations, that we would prefer something else, can't do that because of a restriction which is imposed, and we carry other risks. Now, I'm not quite sure how in governance terms we would then reverse a decision or otherwise, but it seems to me that some flexibility is still called for, and I fail to see that is actually going to do damage to your general principle, which we're all going to be keen to apply, which is let's get as many of these in as possible, consistent with making sure that we don't have something really good coming through that gets caught on the restrictions. Thanks.
Restrictions, yeah.
No, I mean,
Okay.
I think as a principle over the, sorry there, Chris, and sorry, Leslie. I mean, when it comes to responding to ongoing issues with projects, delays, etc., you know, we've always been able to look at exceptions and be flexible. And I think as long as we are firstly taking that through, you know, the right transparent channels, the two boards of the LEP, and keeping in close contact with government, then, you know, sort of the most important thing of all is making sure that we do everything to ensure that projects are able to deliver, and you know, where flexibility is necessary, then of course, you know, that's something that we've always looked to bring in.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I've got Graham Peters and then David Renner. So Graham, over to you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to be particularly partisan, but Roger has given me an opening to be so. It's a very great pity that Riding Sunbeams has fallen through. It's because of very irreconcilable technical difficulties with Network Rail in the end. But I was going to suggest that this £2.5 million is money that, in the overall balance of things, was part of East Sussex's take. And it would be wonderful if we could look favourably on the projects which will be coming forward, I think, under this new regime, for topping up and producing extra outputs in the same sort of way that Roger's, I can't remember, Technoport was.
Techport in Dover.
It sounds great. You've got a couple of others that will provide equally exciting outputs if they were able to have more money. So a slight plea for favourable treatment of anything coming from East Sussex, which I probably won't get away with, but I've got to ask.
Your request is noted, Graham. Thank you. David.
I hope you can hear me.
We can.
Yep, good. My screen froze. I had to go out and come back in, so I've missed all of that discussion. So apologies if I'm making points that have already been made. But I think my view is that we need to be sure that the reasons that projects need more money are genuine ones, not just that they got the figures wrong in the first place. But subject to that caveat, I think our preference would be for supporting existing projects getting seen to conclusion rather than new ones. And to respond to Graham's point, my understanding has always been that if money comes back into the pot, then it's allocated strictly on whatever the criteria are, rather than it going back to the county that the money came back from.
I think that is correct.
Although I have sympathy with you, Graham.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Those points are well made. So what I would like to do is,
Chris, sorry, can I just quickly come in?
Yeah.
I mean, just reflecting on what's just been said, and particularly through Councillor Wagland. I mean, what we could seek to do is agree the recommendations, but remove the cap that's suggested. So remove the 400,000 cap, because I think that might allow it. So obviously there's still a process to go through. You know, the list would have to be agreed at a federated level. They have to be agreed at a LEP level.
Yep.
But, you know, taking on board, I think what Councillor Wagland was saying, you know, perhaps it'd be sensible to not exclude, you know, projects that might, you know, be worthy to be at the top of the list, but might require more than 400k, that we maybe take that out. I mean,
but also, more importantly, Adam, to make sure that we fully allocate the sums that were given to us, and it would be, I think, what the point that Councillor Wagland's making is that those an inflexible imposition of those conditions might mean that money goes back to government, which could be well used within the SELAP area. I think that's the main point, which
Absolutely. Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Wagner was making. Yeah. Okay, so what I'd like to do then is to ask you to agree the approach set out within the report and associated appendices for the development of a new GBF prioritised project line pipeline. And that obviously includes the additional flexibility that where the points have been made, and that we'll look at all projects where that have a case that can be made. And secondly, to agree the GBF spend beyond 31st March 2022 for the following for the project, which is the Swan Modular Housing Factory in Basildon. Can I have an agreement to those two items?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Chris, can you just bring in Stephanie Ennis from Essex Legal? I think just had a hand
Yes.
raised.
Oh, Stephanie. Yes. Sorry, Stephanie. I didn't see. Stephanie.
Hi,
Sorry,
Steph.
I'm just trying to unmute.
Okay.
And apologies, I can't get the camera to start. Just for the conversation that was just had, if there are any amendments that would need to be made to the detail in the report, such as values or anything like that, we'll need to be specific in the recommendation we're voting on.
Yes, I think what we should do, Stephanie, is, I mean, obviously there's a bit of work to be done in making and reallocating this. And I think if it is necessary to ask the board for approval, I think that should be done subsequently through electronic procedure. I think that's probably the best way of dealing with it. That we make sure we get it right rather than try and deal with all aspects here.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's fine. I think just making sure about when we're
Yeah,
talking
sure.
about flexibilities
No,
that we're
yeah,
clear on what we're
yeah,
asking for.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that you know, as and when there is a reallocation that's been agreed, that then just go forward for approval by electronic procedure. Is that okay, Adam?
No, I think what we're saying, Chris, is that what we're agreeing today, what's in the paper,
Yeah.
but I think prior to going through the prioritisation process to follow locally, to come back to the board, that we talked about the 400,000 cap, that effectively we remove that. So that would require a slightly different agreement. I think that's what Steph is getting at there.
Yeah.
So if we can just tweak that via electronic procedure,
Yes,
then
so that's what I'm
subsequent to the
suggesting.
meeting for
That's what I'm
everybody to
suggesting.
agree.
Everyone happy with that?
Just on that specific point.
Happy with that? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, just subject to the point you
So I
yourself
think
made.
yeah, Councillor Goff has just got a point he wants to make.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, I may be being a bit slow here, but can I just understand what we're apparently agreeing at this moment leaves the point that I raised a little earlier in relation to a specific project such as
Well, it allows Tech4 to come back and ask for. It does allow Tech4 to come back and ask for additional sums if these can be justified under the relevant rules under the GBF program. Whether it's the full $1 million.
Sure.
I think it's a question for the people who are doing the reallocation to determine, and then for this board ultimately to agree on. But certainly Tech4 has the ability to come back and ask for more.
Yes, I mean, clearly it is a slightly different process in terms of, as you put it, asking for more, when in effect it is bolting on a second part of the project as opposed to, taking account of increased costs and so on within an existing project. So
yes,
so long as
it is slightly different.
Yeah,
yeah,
so
I agree with that. Yeah.
So long as I'm assured that that is allowed within what we're agreeing, then fine.
I think it is, Adam. Is that correct? Can you think it is?
Can I just refer to Helen on it?
Helen.
Yeah, it doesn't fit entirely within what we're agreeing because it's a new project. It would require a new business case, which obviously increases the element of risk, because the business case that has been approved by Accountability Board was very much focused on casemates.
Yeah, so in this case can be if the case can be made, yes.
Yes,
but yeah, there'll be a sort of route to go through via the business case and the ITE as well. For the paying for that, Roger, might be a conversation we need to have. But yeah, certainly
there is the ability for Tech4 to make the case for the additional. I think Roger was saying additional 1 million. I mean, it's already had 1.06 million from us under this fund, and it's asking for a further 1 million, which is a doubling up. But if the business case is there and the ITE support is there, then it is open to them to make that case.
Okay.
I've got Councillor Wagland and then Graham Peters and Sarah Dance. So Leslie.
Yes, I was only going to say that I think the answer to this is that, as you rightly say, and particularly for Roger's point, the removal of the cap helps in that sense.
Yeah, sure.
I think the other point you made is critical, which is that we don't risk the GBF underspend not being reallocated, refunded. Now, Indeed. For that, I think it does need additional wording. I'm not clear what the legal advice on this will be, but it seems to me that the logic of this is that if members were able to agree that in principle, it ought to be possible, as you rightly said, to deal with the drafting for that as a matter to come back by electronic means. But I would need the lawyers to just confirm that that's okay and that works within Helen's point that you have a report before the board, which we should be saying yes or no to, I guess.
Thank you, Leslie. Stephanie, it's back to you on that.
Sorry, so are we talking about amending the recommendation at this point, or how it? Or
no,
how
whether we have sufficient flexibility within what we've agreed to allow this flexibility.
So I think it just goes back to what Helen was explaining about the procedure that is there. So it would have to fall within the procedure that she's set out and explained.
Forgive me, Stephanie, I'm still not clear on this, and I think nor is anyone else. So can we just clarify this? The point that's being made, I think, is that we have been asked to approve something which includes a cap and provisions that there are concerns, certainly at my level, as to whether that might result in us not being able to fully allocate the underspend. Yeah. As a result of that, I think members are comfortable with the idea that we could remove the cap and that we could have such flexibility to reach a decision on the substantive merits of applications. However, Helen's point is that disagrees with the report, so we can't just say yes to the report. The question for you and Helen is what is the appropriate procedure, therefore, in order to be sure that our difference of opinion with the report to that limited extent is reflected in the proper process and the wording that's used.
So I think if there are still questions about that, then this probably just needs to be taken away and some further detail looked into and added around that if it's not clear that that's going to allow that.
But what I asked the board to agree to was to agree to that flexibility, which I think they did. So I think it's a matter then for Helen and you, Stephanie, to give effect to the board's desire and actually what they just agreed to do, because we did want that flexibility in what we and that was the agreement which I asked the board to vote on, which they did.
And so I think that what's been voted on just needs to be very clear about what flexibility. So instead of just saying flexibility, we just need to make sure it's meant to the detailed flexibility that's needed.
Okay, what I suggest then is that you and Helen get together to agree an appropriate resolution, which they will then ask the board to ratify by electronic procedure. Is that okay?
It's
that's fine.
Stephanie, is the answer to this therefore that the approval of the paper is on the basis that part will be amended in accordance with the way in which the vote has just gone?
Yes.
That sounds like the way forward.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I've got Sarah, Graham, Sarah, and then Clive Soper. Yeah, Roger. Sorry, is your hand still up? Or?
I think it's now a legacy hand. I'm not sure it was a moment ago, but okay. I think it is. I think it is now. Okay, great. So I've got Graham, and then Sarah and Clive. Graham.
I'm sorry to ask for a point of clarity at the end of a discussion. But am I right in thinking the Technoport has already had GBF funding? So it's not a new project.
It's not. It already has had. It's had one. I think I'm right in saying it's had £1,060,000 worth of GBF funding.
Thank you.
And that's okay.
I just wanted to be absolutely clear. This wasn't.
Yeah. So it has had. Yeah. Yes. £1,060,000 of GBF funding. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Sarah and then Clive. Sarah.
Sorry, it absolutely has had funding, but just to clarify, what I understand we might be talking about is a new element of the existing project. And so then this is the question for Helen and Stephanie to sort out, which is, if it's a new element, do we have to still then go through the process of the big business case being done because it's a new element, as opposed to what Helen was suggesting, which was an increased cost, therefore they need more money to deliver the existing project. Anyway, I think the detail of this needs to be sorted out in this agreement, so I won't go on about it.
I think it's the former rather than the latter, Sarah. I think it is a new element, not.
I think it is.
Yeah.
That's what we're suggesting. So I'm just clarifying that actually what Helen is proposing is not what we're now suggesting might happen, but the detail of that will be sorted out, I am sure, by Helen and Stephanie. And then just to sort of emphasize that about timing, time is of the essence. We have a reputational issue as well. This money was meant, so we need to be really sure that the projects that we do decide on are absolutely, hate the phrase, oven ready and can deliver as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's a question on the tech fort. That is a question of whether the existing planning permission that was granted on last month, and indeed the scheduled monuments consent, covers the new new proposal.
I think it does.
Okay, well that's something that no doubt the business case and ITE will cover for that. Okay, I've got Clive. So Clive, over to you.
Yeah, from a business point of view, if this, as it appears, is a new application or will be classified as a new application, surely that should allow other new applications to come forward as well. And I'm not suggesting that they should, but there is that to consider. And the second thing that strikes me is that when this funding was allocated, there was a principle of equitable spread of funding across the LEP.
There was.
And if the £1 million went to a Kent project, that would take away that equitability.
Those are good points, Clive. I don't know if Adam or Helen want to respond to that.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a good point, and I think that's a conversation that will just. I mean, that notion will have to be borne in mind by the board when those decisions are made. Ultimately, the priority number one here is to make sure that the money is spent. On projects that are going to deliver smartly within a reasonable timescale. But absolutely, Clive's right. There is a degree of equitability that sits underneath a lot of the stuff that the LEP's done in terms of fairness over the years. But clearly, in this case, we've got to support the right projects. We've got to support projects that are going to deliver in a certain timescale. And that point around the balance has got to come out in the board discussion when it comes back to the board.
Yeah. Okay. Those are good points. I've got Graham, then Vince, Roger, Leslie, and Rupert. So Graham, over to you.
And I'm sorry to be what may be dim again, and I may have missed something. So we're saying that the tech port is a new element of a project which has already had GBF funding. Does that mean it has to go through the whole set of new procedures that a completely different new project coming from outside would have to go through?
Adam and Helen?
The business case and all those sorts of things.
ITE, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Okay,
then I'm sorry. Maybe we've already voted, but that's not what I signed up to when I agreed to support the paper. The paper is about not introducing new business cases on the grounds that there isn't time to do it before March 23, the March 23 deadline. I'm very uncomfortable with what we've arrived at, because that's given an opportunity to one new project coming forward. It may be very worthy, Roger. There's nothing, absolutely nothing personal against Kent. One new project coming forward when there are plenty of other tremendous new projects which could come forward in simple timescales that don't require planning permission.
It's subject to the clearly to the overriding, as Adam said, Graham, to the overriding principle that everything has to be completed. I mean, everything has to be done spent by March 23.
I'm aware of a project in East Sussex which could spend in about the next 4 months, subject once the business cases are done. I'm sorry, I don't see why I didn't appreciate that it was effectively having to be treated like a brand new project, which apparently it is. I now understand. And I'm uncomfortable with that because that keeps other potential brand new projects of equal worth away from applying. Or does it? I mean, the rules as set out did prevent new projects coming forward, as I understood it. That was the point of them.
Well, if money goes back to government, because there are, yeah.
I don't want it to go back to government. Perhaps the last thing I want is to have to come back to government. But I'm sorry, we've got to be fair. If Kent are able to, in Technoport, effectively introduce a new project because it has to go through all those procedures, that doesn't seem to be reasonable. Just because it.
Well, if there are other projects that can deliver in time, then they could be considered on their merits. No, why not?
Well, as I understood it, that was absolutely what the paper was trying not to allow because of the timescales involved and the burden on the CELEP team.
So are we saying that the Technoport then on that basis cannot be considered?
Chair, may I just intervene and make...
My understanding is no, it can't, because it's effectively a new project.
Well, it's a...
Could I just emphasize... Chair, I think it's a different point from, if I may be so bold, from the point that I was making, which is that there are two risks inherent in what is contained in the report. The first of which is that the 400,000, in fact, it's the same point, that the cap and the limited grounds for application may lead on our officer's analysis to the risk of some of the GBF underspend pot not being reallocated. Now, Roger, I think is and his bid for that is something which, if it's agreed that there should be either an exceptional case type of flexibility, or that we should have some removal of the of what are quite arbitrary caps and the like, that enables things to come forward to us as applications. So no one's talking about who succeeds and who doesn't. This is about whether certain things should be barred. And that, I think, is Graham's point, which is a different point, and which he thinks flows from my wish to see that enough flexibility to be sure that we can deal with the underspend. Does that help in terms of why we got here? Right.
I think it does, Leslie. Yes, it does. So the restrictions, I think we've agreed do need to be looked at, and that's what we've asked Helen and Stephanie to review and see whether or not what we've agreed can be done under the existing governance structure. If it can't, then we'll have an electronic vote to make the necessary amendment. New projects, completely new projects, would appear to be barred by the paper unless this board agrees otherwise.
Chris, can I suggest that you bring in Michael Newman, who's representative of Section 151 at this point, please?
Michael.
Thank you.
Hello, hi. I just wanted to add to the discussion, just to clarify a point about the risk of returning funds to government. Within the grant conditions itself, that we are actually not at risk of returning any monies to government. The key risk we have is on reputational delivery.
Yeah. Okay, so that means that we need to make sure that any monies that we reallocate can be spent prior to 31st March 2023. Correct? That's the risk. Okay. So therefore, what we need, we do appear to have agreed not to exclude any new project. The question is whether Technoport is a new project, or is it a build, or is it add-on to an existing one? I think that's the question. I don't know the answer to that.
Bearing in mind, if I may, that it has to go through the same procedures as a new project. The reason we're turning away, one of the reasons we're going down this route of reallocation and not inviting new projects is because of the timescales involved.
Indeed. So therefore, if the board can be satisfied that the timescales will be met, then why wouldn't you include it?
And why wouldn't you include new projects? Question.
Well, if the answer is if we can be satisfied that they will be spent by March 2023, why wouldn't you? But you have to be satisfied that they could be.
Yeah.
And then they have to go through the normal procedures. Roger, do you want to make a point?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Thank you. I mean, firstly, I think one of the differences is that government's been pretty clear that it won't be supportive of new projects, but Techfort for these purposes is not a new project. It's on the existing list of projects. It is a fair point to say that we would have to have an ITE assessment. That is correct.
And business case.
At the same time, yeah, exactly. And business case and ITE assessment. On the other hand, it is basically a doubling of what we've already got. So you're doing two of these casemates, numbers 51 and 52, and you do exactly the same thing, pretty much, generating exactly the same number of additional, the same number of jobs again in the next two. So it is a relatively simple business case to make. And clearly, going back to a point that was made earlier on, I do sympathise with the point about geographical equity, and that's important, but clearly equally, as I think was said earlier, we want to make sure the money's spent.
Indeed. Okay, thank you.
Can I just, Chris, can I just have my hand up?
Yes, well, so did a number of other people, Clive, but go ahead anyway, since you jumped in.
I totally support Graham in this. I feel that to all intents and purposes, the Kent project is a new project, and therefore, in theory, that exempts them from coming into this. But in any case, there are a number of East Sussex projects that are that qualify for this funding, and if we take into account the equitability of projects, then surely the East Sussex projects should have precedence.
Thank you. Vince?
Yes.
Vince, then Rupert Simmons, and then Joe, James, and then Penny Shimon. So Vince.
Thanks, Chris. I was going to say this probably isn't the place to decide whether Techfort is a new project or an old project. That should be written out in terms of the paper.
Yep.
When we get to look at it, the original scheme was for all four. It's to develop the whole area. And because of the funds available, it was cut to be half of the area. So this is effectively a restoration of the original scheme, which completes the development, probably gives a better return. But that needs to come out in the paper and not be decided here, would be my view on that.
We can't possibly decide it here. I agree.
Absolutely.
I got Rupert, then Joe James, and Penny Shimon. So Rupert.
Thank you very much, Chris. Can I take a different angle here? I am very much concerned about getting our pipeline programs completed by March 2023. And my very grave concern is the level of inflation, which may afflict those existing programs. So I would advocate that we need to be wary of the resources we have remaining being available to existing programs to ensure they get completed.
Yes, it's a very good point. Thank you very much, Rupert. I've got Joe James and then Penny Shimon. So Joe.
Yeah, actually Vince sort of said part of what I was going to say there. And I don't want to drag this out any further, but really just to reiterate that Techfort is an extension, and I use the word extension, of an existing project and not a new project. It's the same site, same work, just more of it and increased outputs. It is a simple business case to put together. It can be delivered. It just needs to be duplication of what they're already doing, and money will be spent and we will get the right outputs.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that. And then Penny.
Thank you, Chris. I'm very clear that the projects need to be completed within the time frame and in a timely manner, and that's the reason we're in this position now. But I think it isn't sufficient to say that we'll just let it come out at the board and in the board discussion about the principle of equity of allocation. Yep. And actually within this paper that is to come about the available projects which can be completed within the time frame, it's absolutely critical that East Sussex projects are given priority within that. And so I feel that it isn't sufficient just to say we're just going to allow that to kind of drift into the decision-making process, but actually there's a clear set of criteria and prioritization.
Thank you. I think where I think we're getting to on this is that we have agreed to the paper that was put to the board, subject to addressing the flexibility point that Councillor Wagland made, that for any projects to get additional money, they cannot be new projects. They will have to be existing projects that clearly demonstrate a clear case for a reallocation, and that, as always within the LEP, we always look at, one of the things we look at, besides making sure that ultimately things can be delivered on time, which is the most important, that there is an element of equity between the various constituent elements of the LEP. Are people happy with that? Okay, I think that's what we've agreed. Thank you very much.
Chris, can I suggest that when when I write back to the board with my responses to the earlier item, I think it might be helpful if we provide some clarity.
Okay, but it should reflect just what I've just said, Adam.
Yeah, indeed.
Yep. Okay.
It's all recorded, which is helpful.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right.
Also, Chris, can I recommend that we bring the growth hub item forward, because we've got a couple of important decisions on it. I'm really conscious we're going to lose quorum really quickly because of the time.
No, I agree. Okay, let's move then to the growth hub update. So that's Jo Simmons. I think you're going to take us through this item.
Yes, thank you, Chris. So I will speak at speed and draw out the salient points of the Growth Hub update paper. As Adam mentioned earlier, we now know from government that we are receiving 50% less funding for Growth Hub core delivery this financial year. I briefed the board at the last meeting that we hadn't had that notification by mid-March, and that notional allocation was given to us on the 30th of March this year. So we had very limited time for business planning for this financial year to deliver the service. We didn't receive the terms and conditions for that funding until the 16th of May. And so what we've been doing is working very quickly with the area lead authorities for the 3 area growth hubs to work out how we deliver a core service with 50% funding this year. And that's just sort of the essence of the paper, because what we worked out very quickly, even in the absence of the terms and conditions, was that if we just halve all activities as they currently stood as at the 31st of March, we wouldn't be able to deliver a core service. The core service, just to remind you, is signposting, triage and diagnostics to SMEs, and to provide a single point of contact for free and impartial advice, and to simplify the business support landscape and to promote national and local business support provision that's out there. So we've been working at pace to work out how we need to modify the delivery model so that we remain within the funding envelope. And we've come up with some proposals which have now been converted into what's called Schedules 1 and 3, because that is what we need to provide to governments in response to their funding offer for them to progress the grant funding agreement process. They had a deadline for that of the 13th of June. So what we've done is we've drafted our Schedules 1 and 3, and we've submitted those to government subject to board agreement today on those very detailed proposals. And that's what we're seeking agreement from board today on, please. The proposals show that we don't want to move away from the hub and spoke model, which is what we've got, which is where we have sort of we coordinate the service within the secretariats, and then we convey funding to the 3 area growth hubs to deliver a more bespoke service across those 3 geographical patches. But we do need to make some modifications to make sure that, because we haven't got enough money to keep the service going as it was last year. So what we're proposing to do is to invest some money to significantly improve the digital offer of the Growth Hub service, so that will enable a lot more businesses to self-serve where they want to, and to improve the signposting facility of the digital offer. And then that will compensate for the reduction in real life navigators and advisors, who are the sort of the front face of the Growth Hub service, who will then be able to target their time more effectively towards those businesses needing more in-depth support. What we're also proposing in this, as a modification in this year, is to provide a single resource to undertake marketing and communications on behalf of all 3 growth hubs, and to provide a single resource to undertake the curation and the generation of material for the website offering and the digital offer. Because if the digital offer isn't up to date, because as we all know that the business support landscape does shift and change, then that digital offer isn't as good as it needs to be. It needs to be kept up to date with up-to-date information. So that will achieve some of the efficiencies of scale that we need to. So for example, instead of the 3 area hubs each having marketing and communications resource in their own right, that will come from a single resource, which can effectively act like a service provider to the 3 hubs. Conscious of time, what we're saying is that we need to implement this model from Q2 this year, which isn't that long away, because of the time that we've lost in the delay from BEIS notifying us of what funding we've got and what we have to deliver with it. So through Q1, things have been maintained, the status quo has been maintained, but what we're looking to achieve is no break in service and as minimal disruption to the service as possible, whilst we try and modify the service so that we're working within our funding envelope. And one of the benefits of these proposals is that once the digital offer is significantly improved, that's an asset that the growth hubs will then have. Because what we don't know, and it aligns somewhat with Adam's presentation at the beginning of the meeting, is the long-term direction of travel of the growth hub service. We know we've got funding for this financial year, but we don't know what's going to happen next year. So modifying the delivery this year in this way means that it can be scaled back up if we get more funding. It can be scaled down further with a stronger digital asset at its centre, or indeed it can be transferred if that's the direction of travel. So what we're looking for today, please Chair, is to look to agree the schedules 1 and 3, which will start the process to release the funding, because at the moment everyone is delivering at risk, and to delegate any minor changes to these schedules to the LEP CEO should they arise from today's meeting.
Joe, thank you very much indeed. Are there any observations or comments or questions on anything that Joe has said? Yes, Vince.
Just finding the unmute button. Just one observation. Obviously, most of this makes sense. Digitalisation is a really good way forward to access this service. I would say that businesses in Kent were very used to communicating and accessing the service via the Growth Hub that we have already. And it seems slightly odd in terms of devolution to be centralising that communication. So having a discontinuity for business to go to one place and then maybe go somewhere else in 1 or 2 years' time. So I would sort of urge that whilst I agree with the direction of the paper, in terms of the detail, we don't break the communication chains that we have locally already to centralise that part. I think there's ways that we'd probably be able to find to make sure that that can carry on. But I think it's really important that we don't disrupt services that are working well just because the centralisation may be a tiny bit cheaper on this occasion.
Okay, Joe, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, happy to. Thank you, Vince. So the single resource is to do the sort of behind the scenes work to generate the material that promotes the schemes, the business support schemes. The actual lines of communication and those relationships that exist at a local area are absolutely key. I would agree with you. And what I didn't mention in my rather speedy speech there was that what still remains within the model is the local steering groups and the local provider groups, and those are the forums that I think are most important to sort of share information on the business support, share insight into what business support is needed, and be able to glean the information that any comms and marketing resource would then need to do that behind the scenes work in terms of promoting those schemes, providing the material, if you like, for advertising what's already out there.
Okay, so I've got Carol Barron and then Carol Ford and then Councillor Wagland. So Carol Barron, you're
first to declare an interest because I'm a director of Kent and Victor Chamber of Commerce.
Sure.
My comment is more around the paper and clarity, linking back to something Adam said. It says removal of the hub data and intelligence post.
Yeah.
And 5.9 says about strengthening and capturing the use of data intelligence. So it's just clarity on that. It seems at odds, you know, so where would that happen? Yeah. Is that under Adam's point about being more involved in data and intelligence?
Joe, very quickly, can you respond?
Yes, thank you, Carol. Yes, it is a bit of a conundrum, isn't it? We've had to reduce the human resources of the model, as you quite rightly point out. So we need to be slicker within the Secretariat about who accesses the data that we collect through the CRM for the Growth Hub, which will happen, that needs to continue to happen. Who accesses that, and we still have resource within the team to do the data and intelligence work that Sharon and Adam spoke about earlier. So it's just about being slicker with using the resource that we still have.
That's great, because it's really, really helpful, Joe.
It's really important, and we need to be a strategically driven hub. We need to be drawing on that data and analysing it and seeing what it's telling us.
Just moving on very quickly. Thank you, Joe. Carol Ford.
I completely agree with the points that Vince has actually made with regard to the business and the business relationships that exist within Kent, and how our Growth Hub works and the fantastic work that they've done over the last couple of years. I am also wondering about, and this is really important actually, in terms of the comms, do they come out under Select branding or is it under Local Hope Growth Hub branding?
It would be under Local Growth Hub branding. So we have a set of branding guidelines from government, and the trick we have to sort of achieve is to, well, not trick, it's we have to comply with the funding conditions whilst providing a bespoke area, whilst we're providing bespoke area services. So the answer is to comply with the branding guidelines that we have from government, we can still maintain the Local Area Growth Hub branding, is the quick answer.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Thank you. And then Councillor Wagland.
Very much. I mean, I sympathise with the late notification from government, and I would like to pass on thanks to the staff who've continued to work hard and support business through this very challenging spell. Whilst the reduced funding is obviously disappointing, at Essex we'd welcome the focus of the Growth Hub's activity again to be on signposting, navigating business to other national and local programmes to support them, and therefore vigorously agree with what's been said so far. Improvements to the website are welcomed. I think the amounts that are being put forward, I entirely agree with the point that we need to understand what potential transitional arrangements are going to be made should any of the areas within CELOP agree devolution deals with the government. We're certainly keen for our own service, which is backing Essex Business, to work closely with the best Growth Hub. So really grateful for the opportunity to add those points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. So what I'm very just conscious of time, I think we should move to the agreements if we can. So we want to, I'm asking you to note the late notification of Growth Hub core funding allocations and associated terms and conditions, and the 50% reduction in the 2022-23 core budget from the 2021-22 funding levels. And then to agree the draft schedules 1 and 3 presented in appendices A and B respectively, which will constitute Growth Hub delivery model for 22-23, which will draw on the principles developed and agreed with Growth Hub lead authority area leads as summarized in paragraph 5 and 6, hopefully taking into account the points made around communications by that have been made by directors. And then also to agree to delegate to the CELEP CEO any subsequent minor changes to the schedules 1 and 3 to reflect any feedback from BEIS or the section 151 officer of the accountable body. Can I have your agreement to those?
Great.
Agreed.
Thank you. Since we also, before we lose our quorum, we've got some policy updates which hopefully will be uncontroversial. Can we just quickly go through those before we move on to the important housing update? Is everyone happy with that? So I'm going to ask Amy, just since we have got we need a quorum for this, to quickly go through the agreements on minor changes to our governance.
Sure, I can be really, really quick. So we've just got 2 changes, one to the assurance framework, which is to reflect a recent decision by the Accountability Board. So it's just bringing that up to date. And a change to the conflict of interest policy, which is just to clarify the position with local authorities declaring their interest, and all the detail is laid out in the paper.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amy. Can I quickly have agreement to both those items? Everyone
agreed?
Okay, thank you very much. So with apologies for the late running, but I do want to deal with the housing update, which will be our last item. And I'm going to invite Liz Gibney to, as our housing champion, to kick off this item. So Liz, over to you, and then you'll hand over to Brian and to Nick.
Thank you, Chris. I'm wondering, Adam and Brian, whether it would be more sensible to postpone this. Conscious that you've got quite a bit that you want to cover, Brian. And as we are late, and I know that other people have things to go to, thank you, Chris, for your support. But I don't know what you think, Adam and Brian, what your views are on this.
I mean, my take would be, this is an important area. It is long overdue that we have a full update on all the housing work to the board, but it obviously isn't ideal to do it at sort of 11 minutes after the scheduled end of the meeting, because we're really keen to communicate to all the board members and fully accept that most folks would probably have to disperse over the course of the next few minutes. So I would be, Chris, your decision entirely, of course, but it might be better for Brian and colleagues to wait. Leave it.
It's probably actually it probably would be, because we're going to have people drop off, Brian and Nick, and I'm very conscious of you having hung around for a couple of hours meant to be put off for the last minute, but for which I desperately apologise. But will you bear with us, and then we'll ask make sure you're.
If I may come in, Chris, just to say, as much as I would love to keep you for the next 20 minutes enthralled by all the wonderful things we do in housing and the great work and how, all the things we're proud of, and I can thank Liz and Nick for their support and everybody else. I suspect all of you have got other things you need to be doing. I'd really be keen, to do this properly. And maybe I can be cheekily ask if next time we'll come back in October, but if we could be a little bit higher up the agenda.
You will be, yes, you will be. I do apologise for this, particularly to you and Nick, for hanging around for a rather lengthy meeting. But I think it's probably better that we do it when everyone's fresh and you have their full attention.
Thank you so much,
Chris. I think that's good. Brian is utterly wonderful, but being concise is not his speciality.
I won't comment.
That's true.
No, but being serious, I think there is a lot to cover, and I just think it's a bit of a waste to do it and try and get it in to be done too quickly. I think. Thank you so much, Brian and Nick, for your patience.
Yeah, I do.
My
apologies.
Yeah, apologies to both of them. I just wondered whether perhaps a paper could be circulated by them, or is it something that just needs to be discussed?
I think it needs a proper presentation, and there's a lot. Particularly relating to the Stodmarsh issue, which has really impacted on Kent and is going to impact on everywhere. I think it's something that we need a proper presentation. I've seen Brian's presentation, and I think he needs to be given the opportunity to explain the really significant work that he and our team have been doing behind them. Really, it's another thing that CELEP has been, very supportive of, and is, I just think it better to postpone, if that's okay.
No, indeed. I wasn't suggesting that we shouldn't discuss it properly, but I just wondered if whether it would help for us to see something before the next meeting.
I think it's better that it's a surprise, David. I think that's the key thing.
Lovely.
All right. Okay.
Chair, if I might, could I just say that I would wish vigorously to disassociate myself from comments about Brian's inability to be succinct. I have to say that whenever he's telling me I've got something wrong in housing, he's always been amazingly succinct.
Thank you very much for that, Leslie. I'm sure that will be noted in the minutes. Fine. Okay. So very quickly, are there any other items of business that anyone would wish to raise?
Chris, just as a point of absolute clarity for the board, so 2 follow-ups for me to follow on from what's been a really healthy discussion this morning. Thank you to everybody. I will issue alongside the minutes a response to the questions that were asked of me after my item at the top of the agenda, because I think it's really important. Some very important questions asked. Clearly, also we need to provide something back to the board on clarification around next steps of getting building fund, because I completely recognise the emotion behind those arguments and the discussion that we've had, and we need to get that right. So we will absolutely follow up on that as well, to the same time scale.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other items of business? No. In that case, some 15 minutes late, for which I apologise. I would like to close the meeting. Thank you all for your participation and contributions.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Chris.
Bye.